Hi there guys, and welcome back to another video. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I've got something a little bit different here for you. I'm going to be talking about crafting in Dungeons& and Dragons. Now in my experience, crafting has been one of the most personal things in a Dungeons& and Dragons campaign. Because the vanilla rules found in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and I know they've been expanded in other books, but because the vanilla rules found in the DMG are so vague and basic when it comes to crafting, you can find them on page, I believe it's 283, that it's led a lot of people to either completely scrap the idea of crafting in D&D, or it's led them to introduce their own rules that are either really good or really naff depending on the DM. And I thought that I would make a video discussing the system that I use for crafting, and I thought I'd talk you guys through it. So this here is a 5-page document that I have compiled to discuss my system of crafting, and in today's video I thought it would be a good idea to actually talk you guys through it and discuss why certain things are in there and how this works. Now, a bit of a disclosure before we delve into this. This document uses bits and pieces from other documents that I have found on the internet that have been recommended to me in the community. So I can't take credit for a lot of the stuff that's in this document, and I also wouldn't want to. For that reason, I'm not dispersing this document. I'm not attaching a link to this document. This is a system that I have created for my campaign, for my players, that fits my needs. If you guys like this, if this is something that you're interested in, then watch this video, and this should give you a lot of tips and pointers and potential rules for creating your own document that is similar to this one. Additionally, this is not a document that I've gone through and really polished up for like the community to use widely. This has a lot of issues in it. There are a lot of things in here that make sense to me that may not make sense to you, and as a result I encourage you to look at this document critically. Have a look at how you can implement it into your world if you're looking at including crafting. So the first thing that occurred to me when you basically look at the non-existent raw 5e crafting method is that it really only focuses on one of those methods, and that is enchanting. You basically get no information on alchemy and smithing, despite the fact that alchemy supplies are a thing, despite the fact that smithing tools are a thing. We basically get no information on these at all. We do get some information on enchanting. I wanted to separate crafting into 3 categories, and that is alchemy, smithing, and enchant. The reason I decided to do that is because in my head, basically any item in Dungeons and Dragons can fall into one of these 3 things. So I thought, yeah, let's separate crafting into these 3 elements. Now this isn't a new thought. What a lot of people will tend to do is they'll have a system for alchemy, they'll have a system for smithing, and they'll have a system for enchanting. But I didn't want that. I wanted one system that worked for all 3. And I think that's where this document and these rules, they get a little bit different from the norm. So the way this works is there are 3 things you need to make any item in Dungeons and Dragons. You need the skill to make the item, you need the tools, you need the workshop basically to craft it, and you also need the materials. You need the raw materials. All of these things are going to affect a creation DC. And the creation DC, it can change, it can alter, it can be affected by multiple factors. But basically it's the roll you need to do at the end of the creation process to see if the item is either made or not made. Depending on the DM, the item might be made and it might be of a poorer quality. It really depends on the DM, but either way there is a creation check, and that is going to dictate that. Another goal that I had is to have crafting be something that is universal. Every character can craft at a basic level. Common items can be made by characters of first level, and they can be made with minimal equipment. All you need are some tools to make a common item. This means with no additional training, any character can perform things like basic repairs or create some common items for Dungeons and Dragons. If you want to get the skill needed to create more advanced items, for example rare items or very rare items, then what you need to do is you need to take a feat in either the alchemy, the smithing, or the enchanting. At smithing, a basic character, a level 1 character, will know how to make some basic light armor and some simple weapons. They can then take a feat, and now they can craft medium armor, they can craft shields, they can craft martial weapons, and that sort of thing. Then they can take another feat, and at that point they are able to make heavy armor, they're able to make the more advanced, difficult stuff. There are basically these skill gates that they need to pass through in order to be able to craft those higher, more rare equipment. The first thing I discuss in this document is a place to work. Now this is basically what I mean when I say tools. No matter who you are or what you're trying to make, you are going to need either a forge, a lab, or an enchanter's station, something that has the tools and equipment that you need to create the item you want to make. We got some basic information on workshops here. What I decided was that you can either build a workshop or you can rent a workshop for a month for 1% of its build cost. So in this instance, that would be 10 gold per month if you wanted a very basic level 1 workshop, all the way up to 100 gold a month if you wanted to rent a more advanced workshop. And the way this works is that there is a production per day. So every day you can produce a certain number of gold pieces worth of equipment, and that dictates the time it takes to make something. Let's say a character has only the most basic tools on them. They only have some very basic smithing tools, which gives them a production cost of 5 gold pieces per day. And they wanted to make a set of plate armor. Then it would take them, you divide that by 5, which is their production cost, and it would take them 300 days to make a set of plate armor. Just smithing tools. They haven't got a forge, they haven't got anything. It would take them 300 days of trying their best to get something that is relatively suitable. Now, if they wanted to reduce that cost, then it's really simple. What they can do is they can upgrade their equipment. If they have a very rare forge, a forge that is designed to create very rare items and equipment, then they have a production cost of 40, so it would only take them just over a month to make a set of plate armor. As a result, the better the equipment you have, the quicker you can produce items and things like that. What you can also do to reduce the cost of things is you can hire assistants. Now this is something that comes in really important if your players are trying to create things like magical items. If your players are trying to make magical items, they might, these things have a production cost of things like a couple of 1,000 gold pieces at least. So if your player is going, right, I want to make a flame tongue longsword, and the cost of that longsword to make is something like 7,000 gold pieces, then what they might want to do, instead of spending 14 months of game time trying to build this item, they could hire some assistants to help them. But what that does is it multiplies the production speed. For every day they spend with an assistant helping them, they do double the work. And you can have a group of, 1, 2, 4, 6, 10, 15, 20 assistants all helping you, provided you've got the workspace to do that. So that's why things like magical items are going to cost so much, because one magical item might require something like 15 arcanists in order to make. The last thing we have is materials. Materials are obviously super important. So the cost of materials is always equal to 1/2 the cost of the item you are making. So for example, if we take our plate armor that I mentioned earlier, take our plate armor, the cost that you would need to spend on the materials to make the plate armor is 750 gold pieces. You can also have gathered materials replace the material cost. So for example, if somebody has gone out of their way to secure a giant shipment of steel, then they might be able to come across and they don't need to now pay those material costs because they've already stolen the material in-game. So this gives you some fun little additional content that you could introduce into Dungeons & Dragons. What I decided to include here is to have the ability to also skimp on materials or pay a bit extra for some higher quality materials if your players wanted to. So say your player is really, really skilled. They want to make a set of plate armor, but they're really skilled. They know what they're doing in a forge. They've taken the feats. They know what they're doing. They've got a really good workshop. They might be able to make that piece of armor only paying a quarter of the material costs. They might want to buy some better material, paying a little bit extra, eating into their profit margin, but they would be able to have an easier time of making that item then. And this all comes into play in the creation checks right here. So my goal here is to try and make this quite simple. The way it basically works is depending on the item that you're crafting or making or whatever it might be, you need to make a check, and the check is always adjusted by either a +5 or a -5. So for example, they're trying to make a rare potion. Well, that rare potion is going to require a standard DC of 20. They have a level 3 workshop which allows them to create very rare items. Well, in that situation, they're going to lower the DC by 5. They now only need to get a 15. They've decided to buy the highest quality ingredients they could find, cutting into their profit margins because they've paid a bit extra for those ingredients. And that's going to lower it by an additional 5. So now, to create this rare potion, they only need to succeed at a DC 10 check. And that's the kind of system that is sort of like designed here, so that it kind of is quite versatile. It can work with a bunch of different forms of crafting. The only thing you need is to have a rarity on an item, and this works for it. So that is the basic setup of this D&D crafting guide. I don't really want to go into these specifics here because these are quite specific for my group and my campaign. I tried to design this to allow my players to be able to experiment with potion creation, to experiment with enhancing different pieces of armor and things like that, and to also create new spells and that kind of thing. But as I said, these are quite campaign specific. These aren't things that I don't think I've really gone through and thought a lot about. But this is a basic, right here, this is a basic system that you might wish to design and use in your own games, and if that is the case, I hope you get some use out of this. Maybe in a future video, if people find this really useful, I will go about and I'll include these extended sort of expanded sections. I'll talk a bit more in depth about those, but I'd like to give them a few more playtests before I go sharing those with you guys properly. That way I can kind of try to iron out the issues with it before I go showing you guys and telling you a bit about it and what I recommend with that. But thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day.